talk about? Okay. My official version of that. And I sort of tell you, when I was a kid, I worked up on River Drive and pumped gas from about 1981 to about 1990 or so. And of course, after that I went to school, went to college and all that stuff, taught school for a number of years. But I always like to say, everything I ever needed to know in life, I learned right there pumping gas. All the best lessons. But anyway, that's sort of what we're going to do here. And I'm going to talk about coal and oil, and I'm going to talk about coal first, so this is a little shorter. But coal, really, to talk about coal in Estill County, you have to go back to the Civil War. When you go back to the Civil War, of course, how the North ended the Civil War was they pretty much devastated the South all the way to the ocean. And when they did that, it took a long time to rebuild. A long time. Even right around the turn of the century there, and Skip probably knows the date, but the Riley B. Railroad ran through Irving and came, it actually went, it stands for Ravenna, Nicholasville, it's got all the acronyms there of all the counties it went to. And actually went to National Bridge, right?
Ravenna, Irving,
yeah, Ravenna.
Riley B., Ravenna, Irving, Nicholasville, and Badeville. But it never made it to Badeville.
No, never made it to Badeville. And so what happened was, the Riley B. was not, they didn't make any money on it. So they actually sold the thing out early, right after the turn of the century there. They sold out the L&M. But what happened there is, and sort of like I said, through Reconstruction, they spent all the government, federal government money went on rebuilding the country. They were building back these railroad lines, they were doing all this stuff, and they didn't really turn to natural resources till about 1900 or so. Okay, so 1900 or so, L&M bought the Riley B. Railroad, and the Riley B. Railroad kind of ceased to exist, kind of morphed into that, and they finished the track to Badeville, and when they did that, they realized that, Ravenna would make a nice hub for the railroad. The railroad, they built that up. Of course, they built the town of Ravenna and laid it out block and block. And each little lot in Ravenna is about, I think I'm right here, it's a quarter to half acres, about all they are. And it's all laid out perfect. All the streets run this way, run by numbers, and all the streets run this way, run by trees. And that's the way it goes. So the railroad sort of did that, but the reason they did that, and I want to check something here, but the reason they did that was because the demand for coal really began to start right around this time period. Okay? And if you, sort of the background of that, there's a big, gigantic vein of natural resources, coal, gas, underground that goes from up in Pennsylvania and comes all the way down in through Kentucky, and it's got a name, and I had the name of it at one point there with that underground. It's not really called an aquifer, but that's what it is. And it ends somewhere around central Kentucky here. Okay? And during this time period, of course, the technology got better around the turn of the century. They figured out that, there's coal underneath this area. Now, coal really doesn't affect Estill County as much as oil, because coal really was just more about, we were the hub to transfer. Okay? I know there's some coal veins in Estill County, but I can only remember one coal vein, and it's up on 82 out there, about where you turn to go to Drip Rock. It's up on that left-hand side of the mountain up there. There's a vein of coal up there that they talked about mining for years and never did. They just never did. Now, the reason they probably didn't is because they didn't own the mineral rights.
The quality, too.
And the quality, too, got down.
But there was another seam up off Waders Mountain.
Is that right?
Yes.
Waders Mountain right up on the other.
Up near the old dump.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Stevie Woolery owned the property at one time, too,
Mm-hmm.
I know that.
Right. I know what you're talking about. But anyway, the coal, what really happened there was it was, once it started coming out of the ground with it, the railroad started to really work around 1910 to 1920. The big coal mines really started in eastern Kentucky. And I'm talking about big coal mines, and what they would use there was, they'd use what they call deep bore or auger mining, and they would bore a big hole in the top of the mountain and go down, and they'd use a shaft and take their workers down that way. And the guys in the mountains still today call it working in low coal. What they would do is go down in there and they would slam their backs and choose with that. You know, just working in low coal. They did that for years until technology got better and they got to put the little, I would call them escalators, but that's really not what they are. They just run, it's just like a,
Continuous miner.
yeah, you just throw the coal on there and it goes out. You don't have to do any work. They don't have to do any transport back and forth. But that's sort of, coal did that until up in the 1970s. They really did that. And then somewhere through that period, they discovered that strip mining was way easier. Just take the top of the mountain off, go down to the vein of coal, and take the coal out, and it's easier. Now, with all that being said, what really, somebody back in the older days, there was a number of guys that did it. John C. Mayo, a number of guys in eastern Kentucky. They went around different pieces of property and they bought the mineral rights, which just basically means they bought everything underground. You could live on top, you could have your farm, you could do whatever, but they owned what was underground. When they got into the coal exploration, they figured out that it was a lot bigger than what they thought. So they ended up moving some people around. So what they'll talk about a lot of times now, bottom form deed. That's what it's called. A bottom form deed, they would be able to just collect those minerals underneath there and they could move you and do what they wanted to. That ran a long time. And it's still sort of doing the same thing in Estill County with oil, but I'll talk about that in a few minutes. But that's the way coal operates. But when they went to cutting the mountaintops off and removing the coal that way, it was much easier because it didn't take near as many men. You didn't have near as many people working down underground. What it took then was a lot more equipment. They have what's called a steam chisel, which is just basically a big piece of equipment that's got just like a big fork on the end of it, and it just chisels that stuff out. A lot easier to collect and a lot cheaper. Not near as many workers, really nobody underground, and they just kind of look for veins of coal. Now, let me tell you one thing about that. If you still sometimes if you travel up into eastern Kentucky some, you'll still see veins of coal running through if you're going down the road, you'll still see like a 4-inch or a 5-inch just vein of just black coal going through the new road at Breath is the best one I can remember. The new road that goes into Breathitt now, you can see little veins of coal in there everywhere. Well, you can sort of see them because, it goes for miles down through there. You can see it's easier to just cut the top of the mountain off and come down there and get that. But, that little vein of coal that long is not worth getting. They don't do it. Here's kind of a little known fact. Any kind of road project in Kentucky, it's been this way for a long time, any kind of road project in Kentucky, it's in the contract with the road builder that if they run into a vein of coal, they're allowed to stop working on the road, mine that coal. So that's what they did. That's the 23 that goes all the way up through Jenkins, Letcher County, over into Virginia. That road that came all the way through Pikeville and came down to McGoffin, Sayersville, that way, there was a lot of coal on that project. They said by the time that road went through, it ended up being about $3 million a mile. And it's miles through there. It goes all the way over to Bristol. So that's kind of an idea of what happens with coal. Coal, once they went into strip mining, it made it a lot easier to a lot cheap steel, is what it did. But coal, all right, so let's see here. I think it was about 1917 or so, Harry LeVere Sr. had a number of coal mines up in Letcher County, and he had ran those for years, and they did pretty well there, but somewhere around the 40s or 50s, I can't remember the exact date, but somewhere through there, they decided that coal would burn better if you cleaned it. So they put in Southeast Coal out here, and that's its entire purpose was. All those trains that come out of the mountains, that come down through there, they had to stop in there, they emptied those coal cars, they sprayed them off, cleaned it, do whatever they did to it, prep it's what they called it, and put it back on the train and send it out. Now, all that coal, anybody know where all that coal went to out there?
A lot of it went to Japan.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, but a lot of it went to KU.
A lot of it went to KU.
All the big power plants, KU, RECC, any of the Clark Energy, They all get that. They still burn it today. That's why they're still operating those today on coal. So coal's effect on Estill County was pretty much, it built a community, it built Ravenna and Irving. It really went a long period of time. I mean, it went from the about 1920s or so all the way up into the 90s. And I can tell you a good story about that. 1995, I graduated from high school and I graduated from EKU, and I go in there and meet with my advisor, and they asked me, what's going to be your major? And I said, well, wood and coal technology. You know, I'm from Irving over there, we've got Southeast Coal, we've got the railroad, and I'm going to major in wood and coal technology. That advisor looked at me and said, we just dropped that major, we'll never carry that anymore. So this was 85, so I always thought, well, that's kind of wild, why would they do that? Well, they knew a lot more than I did, because within 5 or 6 years, it was gone, both of them were gone. The railroad took a little longer, but Southeast Coal was pretty much out by then. So they had saw that change in demand coming, I guess, or it's pure coincidence. One of the two.
No, they knew.
They knew, yeah. So, anyway, that's sort of what happened to coal. But now, if you can remember, my granny lived up on Broadway, and I stayed with her a lot when I was young. And I can remember the yards being full, and those trains just rattling all night long. Now you never see a train in there, you know, unless it's sitting there for 11 months, 12 months. But I tell you what I did see the other day. I noticed that there's some coal cars come through Richmond and go right through downtown. You know, if you're stopped at a stoplight downtown, they went by with not many. So I asked around and found out that coal's coming out of Millsboro. All the coal now is coming out of Millsboro and Bell County, and they're mining it in there, and that's, they're sending it north. It gets on that north. It never goes towards Irving, never goes any that way. So that's what's happening with coal. Matter of fact, one of these books, there's two great books out there about coal in Kentucky. One of them is Night Comes to the Cumberlands from Harry Cole. And the other one that's actually better than this one is a book called Theirs Be the Power. And he talks about the first coal mine down in, it was in Bell County actually, where they cut the tunnel through there. So that's sort of what's happening there. And I can remember when I was pumping gas back in the 80s, I can remember that those railroaders always tell me that each one of those coal cars was $1 million. And that was a long time ago. So I'm not telling how much one of them's worth now. But that's what it was then, or at least that's what they said. I knew they had pretty good info there. Let's see.
But Dick, if you think back, about the time, well, it was a little earlier, it's when OPEC did the false shortage.
Yeah, 74.
74.
I got that in all.
But that caused coal to boom too.
Oh yeah.
Coal went from $8 a ton to $80 a ton.
Yes. In the mountains they call it, everything in the mountains is judged by coal's up or coal's down. You know, if nobody's got any money, they'll say coal's down. All right, if coal's up, everybody was working pretty good. And the industry just changed. It went from that deep, I can remember in the 70s when they had miner strikes and doing some of those kinds of things. Didn't really affect us here. But I remember that happening, and then towards the end, you know, they didn't have that because they weren't using deep underground mining. They were just using surface mining. Didn't take all those employees. It just took truck drivers to drive those big huge trucks. And somebody loaded. I think I read where it took about six employees to run a big surface mining operation. That's compared to hundreds to go underground and ship it out. So the big effect there on Estill County was really just the railroad yards and moving it back and forth. I can remember I had some good stories on that. Somehow I knew when I was pumping gas, I knew that every car that was overloaded in Ravenna, they paid somebody to go over there and dig them off. They reweighed them. When they met the weight, they went on out of town. So, I mean, this went on forever, and one of my buddies, we'd go over there sometimes and dig them off. We actually had a loader on the back of a flatbed truck. That's how we dug it out. It's a dangerous operation. But anyway, that's what we did. Anyway, that went for years and years and years we did that, or they did that. And 30 years later, I found out that somebody was going to Hazard and paying them to overload the trains so they get the overloads.
Well, they gave you the coal and paid you
That's right.
to do it.
Yes. Yes, that's exactly what.
Remember, there was a truck sitting out there that you all were digging the coal out of and putting it back in the dump truck.
Yes.
I remember that.
And I can remember another big scam that, you know, of course, I was young, I was 15 or 16, but all the guys who come in here, the engineers who come in there, they would talk about running, they would run a lot of some freight then, they would run different stuff. But they would bring beer into Winchester over there, and it was right on the main street, you know, you just pulled there and unloaded it. I always had 200 cases, but the guy over there only got 180. I always got 180, so that's just two great stories about coal. But that's about all I got about coal. But what I really want to talk about is oil, because oil is what I really know more than that. I just want to make sure I didn't miss anything.
But at Southeast, a lot of times, Fred can tell you, we ran what they call barges of coal.
Yeah.
Japan was buying barges of coal.
Mm-hmm.
There were 16 cars and one barge of coal.
Mm-hmm.
You know, because everyone was scared that coal was going to keep going up, and Japan was buying it and taking it and dumping it in lakes.
Mm-hmm.
So they could go back and get it. I mean, it won't.
Some other time, yeah.
But we ran barge after barge, didn't we, Fred?
Oh, yeah.
I mean.
Yeah.
And it was, I mean.
So what's the deal? I never did understand why it had to be clean. I didn't understand why clean coal would burn better than dirty coal.
Well.
It wouldn't make any difference to me.
And what we didn't realize then, but half of what we were washing out there was coal.
Yeah.
But pure coal floats.
Yeah.
So what we were doing, we were basically using water at Southeast out there to take the rock, what little bit of rock was in that coal, the impurities. That's all they were doing.
Yeah.
But in that rock that we were taking out and pumping up on that hillside, half of that was coal. And this last little enterprise come out there and took a whole lot. There's still a whole lot of coal laying on that bike.
Oh, there's tons. I was out there a lot when I was in school business. But, yeah, they definitely, okay, I get it on that. Well, let's talk about oil. So oil is just a little different.
And they crushed that coal, Dickie.
Yeah, I remember they crushed that coal. And then I'll tell you what else too. I was in the mountains up there. I'm in the mountains time to time. And they say now that what they'll do is they can't mine coal anymore. What they'll do is go back to where a coal tipple was sitting 15, 30, 40 years ago and redig that back up. Because they'll say that coal is better than any coal they can mine right now.
It is.
Yeah, so they'll just go back in there where a tipple set years ago, move all that out of the way and dig right there because, you know, when you run it up those big
Run mine belt.
yeah, the big belts went up there, it falls off on the side, or they didn't fool with that, they just left it. But now it's piled up there, go right back in those places, dig that up and use it. So the coal business has definitely changed. Is it gone? No, I mean, it's gonna be around because we're still using it for KU still using it, RACC, all them are still using it. But, is it gone for us here in Essex County? Yeah.
Yes.
Because it's coming out somewhere else cheaper. It's coming out somewhere else cheaper. All right, anyway, oil. Let's talk about oil. So really for Essex County, I think there's three booms of oil, and I got a theory on that, but there's three booms of oil, somewhere around the 20s, then in the 50s, and then after 2000 here. And what really drove the boom in oil each time was the price of a barrel of oil. That's what happened. Okay? So let me back up here just a little bit. So that first, right around the turn of the century, just like we were talking about earlier, right after the Civil War, right after Reconstruction, about the turn of the century there became a bigger demand for oil. Anybody got a clue why? Ford automobile. That's what did it. You know, when Ford came out with the cars, needed gas, oil went up. And when it went up, they really started to look for different places. Now, you wouldn't think that, but Kentucky is one of the top producers of oil in the country. I think it's number 3. Of course, I'm sure Texas is the biggest one, but I don't know the second one. But Kentucky's been number 3 for a while. All right. So the 1920s boom, that was really caused by Ford Motor Company developing that car. So they came in here, you know, with rough equipment. They didn't have the greatest equipment in the world, but they came here and put these oil wells in, and they, you know, was pumping that oil, trying to get as many barrels as they could get a day out of that oil. Did that for years. And that one's kind of on and off and didn't really last that long because you could mine it in other places cheaper. You could get it out of the ground in other places, you know, without having to dig. Even today, they talk about up in Estill County, they say, it's all up there still, but they can't get their equipment in here to go deep enough to get it. They can only go 2,000 to 3,000 feet, and they say they need to go 10. So 10,000 feet's a long way to ground.
No.
It takes, it's right, it takes a big piece of equipment to bore that, get in there where they can't get it up in Furnace and up in some of those places like that. So, Skip brought in his map, and I've seen this thing for years, but he's got a map laying over there that's got every oil well, or at one time, every oil well in Estill County. And it just shows little black dots on there, and they're everywhere. You can see anywhere that they could find that, they would, put an oil well in. And we were talking about it just a few minutes ago, for years and years and years, you could ride across Furnace and smell sulfur. You know, it burned your nose, it did it for 40 years, I know of. But there's a government grant out there now, they're capping all those, or they might be making them do it now, but they're capping a lot of those unclaimed wells, so that up on the mountain doesn't smell anymore. They're just capping them off, I guess, safety reasons. You know, my thought is, if you cap all them off, you're building better pressure underground.
You are, but the methane,
Yeah, you keep the methane
and
gas.
you greenheads, or you, whatever you wanna call it, you environmentalists, or
You're right, right. Well, all right, so the 1920s, so Texaco, the big oil company that we all knew, that really is not around anymore, somebody bought them out now, there's 2 or 3 of them. Texaco put in a refinery up at Price, and they called it Texola, Texola, Texola. Well, they put it up there, and of course, the big barrels are still up there. It's close to the railroad tracks, so they wanted to use the railroad tracks to move this oil that they were mining all through there, Cobb Hill, Tippy Ridge, and all these different areas, and that was sort of their place. They did it, had a general store, had their own school, they had a real operation, but it didn't last very long. It didn't last very long because it just didn't make any money. They closed it out, and it's still sitting there today. My dad would talk about, in the 50s, they would go over and play around it, and they'd get in trouble all the time, because they'd be down there, they'd ride their bikes all the way to the top tip of the ridge, down to Price, to go over there and just hang around that place, and, of course, their mother was always on about snakes, you know, over on Price, but Texola was in there, and it did that, and they tried it, didn't make much money. So that kind of closed out, pilfered out. And then the next big run, of course, was really in the 50s, and kind of lasted all the way up to the 70s, because if you remember, there was a company up in Ravenna that mined oil, but the first, I remember it being Wright Energy. It was probably something before that, I don't know what the name of it was. It was Wright Energy when I was a kid. And they had a number of guys, and they went around and checked oil wells, and that's what they did. It lasted till about 88 or so, and it was gone. They let them all go. It was over too. But a couple of things on that, what drives that really. 2 things. Number one, I think the price of oil, the price of a barrel of oil drives it. But number 2, it's under the ground there, and of course a number of conditions cause it to create that, and a number of conditions, if you suck it all out of the ground, then it's going to take a while to replenish itself. So if you can sort of look by the booms there, it takes about 30 years for it to get back to where you can actually get to the easy stuff. Not get to the hard stuff, but you can get to the easy stuff. So 20s, the 50s, then it went a long time there. We went through the 80s and 90s where barrel oil was $20. And then finally when George Bush II was president, remember oil kind of spiked up to about $50 to $60 a barrel. Everybody went back to pumping. They all pumped that up there and been pumping it ever since. Okay, and that's sort of the third boom. But the 50s boom, did pretty well, did okay, didn't last very long either. And then you were talking about earlier, the Arab oil embargo of 1974, when they said they were not going to provide us any oil anymore, of course, everybody around here was pumping. They all went back to pumping, and they did a lot of different things there, and oil, of course, went up, and that lasted a pretty good while, too. Getting it out of the ground, like I said, is a hard part, but they found a way. Now, what's happened on that is the technology has got so much better in the last 30 years. Now, it's a completely different thing. Now, they only pump at night. hardly ever see an oil well pump here today. They all,
Non-peak.
yeah, non-peak, that's right. Yeah. Skipper probably knows more about it than I do, but it's, if you talk to any of them that know what they're talking about, they all say it's got something to do with the full moon. It's got something to do with the high tide on the ocean and low tide, because this same salt water that's under us here is the same water from the ocean. It's coming through here. So the best example I got of that is my dad's got a little cabin up way out Watson Ridge, and he had an uncapped gas well out there that they went out there and measured it one day. He had 7 pounds of pressure, and they said, "You got enough here to run a small community." Well, he said, "Well, that's great." So he covered it all up, put him a register on it and all that stuff. Well, that little old mini boom he had around 2004 right in that area. He came in one day and said, "I lost all my gas. I don't have any gas." And I said, "Yeah, I can tell you what happened to your gas." And he said, "What's that?" I said, "Well, you got a guy over the hill there running 7 wells. He's running 7 wells, and he was making at least 4 or 5 barrels a day per well." I said, "He's sucking off all your gas." You know, that's what he was doing. He said, "Well, I'll fix that." So he goes up there and takes him like a big propane barrel, and he sets that down there, and he runs his line over that, and he fills up that big tank. Now he runs it over to his cabin. He's got full tank. But that's what happened to him. Now they quit pumping up there again, and he's had gas back. And forever, so that's just what happens to it. So it's right back to that same thing about those guys know they pump at night because they get that pressure from high tide. And
Electricity's cheaper.
Electricity's cheaper, and they're doing that. No, Skip and me were talking the other day, and he said one of the guys told him it takes right now it's taking about $54 a barrel to pay for itself.
To break even.
To break even, you just break even $54 a barrel. Now when I was a kid, I remember they begged for $20 a barrel of oil, and never could get to it. So $54 per barrel. Now I got some good numbers for you here. There was a company in Estill County in 2001 that made 582,000 barrels of oil. Number 1 producer in the state, number 3 in the country. They made 582,000 barrels of oil in 2021. Now, it's a big conglomerate company, so one of 2 things happened. One, they either made that much oil, or 2, they got some oil somewhere else that they put on these wells up here, which is not impossible to do. You pumped in Texas or somewhere, but you put it on this wells up here, say it come from there. You could do that. But if you did, if you did the numbers on that, let's just say it was what we just talked about, $54 a barrel times 582,000 barrels. That's some pretty good. That's big money. So they did pretty well on that.
It's $76 a barrel today.
Is that what it was today? Yeah. So see. All right, now I'll tell you something else about this, and I knew this, and I don't remember how to do it, but they come in here from Denver, this company did, and they sent some people in here, and they bought up all these mineral rights, and they did a lot of stuff in the early 2000s, and they did that. But what they also did was buy an insurance policy. So their insurance policy stated that if oil ever got below $60 a barrel, they got compensated at $60 a barrel. So you remember it stayed up above 60 for a number of years, and it sort of tanked there for a while, around 2010 or so, right after the stock market crash in 2009, and the insurance money kicked in. So that kept them afloat.
They're still here. They're still here.
Oh yeah, no, still pumping. Now not those kinds of numbers, but still pumping. And they're pumping at night, and they're really doing good on that. I mean, that's it. That's solid. They set them all on timers now. They all pump at night. They all bring it down to the separator. And, it separates out the water, and the oil goes in one barrel, and they come here and pick it up every few days. Now, you all probably remember this. Back in the old days, you had that big barrel sitting there full of seawater, salt water. A lot of people would just turn that valve loose, and they'd run out on the ground, and then go over to the creek or wherever else. But EPA came in a number of years ago with big fines that they cost you doing that. You couldn't do that at all. So now they have to take a big water truck right up to that separator, pump that salt water out into that water truck, and it goes down here to the sewer plant, and they run it through there somehow. It goes back in the river. So they must run it through the maze, and it must
I don't
get the
know.
salt out of it. I don't know how they do that either, but that's what.
Goes through a process. That's why Pitts Lake is there,
Yes, that's what it was.
because they were diluting the salt water.
There's another big one around the curve there called South Fork Lake,
Yes.
if anybody's ever seen it. It's empty now.
It's empty.
Yeah, it'll come up in summer about 8 feet, and then, most of the time though, it's down really low. But all it was when I was a kid, we used to ride motorcycles through there. And all it was, then they just turn on the oil wells, least on top of the hill, and turn that separator off, and the water would run down in there.
It diluted the salt water.
Yeah, the reason I knew that, about 1978, I was probably 10 years old, we were riding up there somewhere, and I got off my motorbike, was over to get a drink of water, and I did. It's nothing but pure salt water. I couldn't figure out what was going on, so they turned it. They turned that well, we sit on top of the hill, there, you down there drinking it. But that's just what they did, but now they don't do that, now I mean, it's a big deal. It's another expense.
EPA.
EPA, well, it's probably the right thing to do, because you put salt water in there everywhere. But you would think that salt water, time it ran over, as my dad used to say, time it run over 7 rocks, it's clean again. But I don't think there's any truth to that. I think it just leaves behind the sediments, and the water still got
I
salt.
don't think so either.
No, we used to tell that. You remember Clarence Nolan, don't you?
Very well.
Clarence, you know, one time I told that story in front of Clarence, and he said, oh, everybody knows that ain't the truth. He said, it's gotta run over at least 14. He believed it too, but he wanted 14 rocks. And I said, I think you both lost your mind. I think no matter how many run though, still gonna have salt in it.
But you talk about the old boom, and one reason I remember this, I came home for Christmas,
Mhm.
and it was 1973,
Yes.
and they went up Alexander Hall,
Oh, yeah.
Jim Martin.
That's a big one.
Well, they drilled down a mile,
Mhm.
and I asked, you know, they were really optimistic. I mean, I'd never seen anything like that. I mean, it was they were going 24/7, you
Yeah.
know, drilling, and they hit salt water. Of course, I knew, I was there with Jim Martin and him, and I heard them talking, and I asked this guy, I said, did you all hit a pocket of salt water from when we were covered over from an ancient sea?
Yeah.
He said, no, we hit the ocean.
Yeah.
And I said, well, how did you do that? He said, there's a karst. There's a cave system from here all the way to the ocean, underneath through Virginia.
Yeah.
And it comes out on the coast. He said, we've hit the ocean. This is seawater. It ain't an old pocket of
No,
salt
it's
water
not
from
right.
millions of years ago. It's,
So I did a little research on that. So back before, when all the 7 continents were still touching each other, and it was called Pangea, before they broke apart, there was a gigantic ocean dead underneath of West Virginia that went out from there, and it was called Ophelia,
yes.
okay? And that's what it was. Of course, when it's now branched over the Atlantic Ocean, but the heart of it was right at West Virginia. So now when you go to the store, Kroger, wherever, you see the sea salt. The best sea salt in the world comes from West Virginia. That's where that was.
Wow.
Yeah, that's where they're getting that from.
And they don't have limestone rock.
That's right. So that's exactly what they're doing. They're taking that and making the sea salt out of it. Everybody's wild about it. But of course, evidently, I just thought that was kind of a new fad of the last 5 or 6 years. But no, that's been around for years. They talk about somebody was mining that sea salt years ago and selling it, and they said it won the World's Fair best salt for a number of years. So that's been an old thing that's still going along, but it's right under the West Virginia part down there, really close to Kentucky. In that area is where I think they do a lot of sea salt mining. How they get that out of the ground, I'm sure they pump that salt water out somehow.
And dry it.
And
Just
dry it.
evaporate it, it leaves the solid.
It leaves the salt, and they process it, and boom, it goes. But that's a big one. Let's see here. Yeah, I got that one. So let's see, Ironburg, I got that one. Now, there's a guy over here, over here where Cornet Chrysler used to be, and now they got all those boats and whatever sitting up there. That guy, he came in from Colorado. I stopped talking to him from time to time. His name is Nicholson. And he told me, he said, there's still plenty of oil up in here, but they just cannot go deep enough to get it. He said if they could get the equipment in here where they could go down 10,000 feet or so, they would get plenty of oil left. But so they can't get to it. They can't get the equipment in there to get to it. If it's somewhere like, up Cow Creek, where you could do it. But you get up on the mountain, there's too many rocks, too many different things, too many barriers to get down in there where you can make a, on some of his oil wells he's talking about, that it shows over there. Now, if they get one of those oil wells like that, and they really, you get a good producer, I've heard of one. The most I've ever heard, you might have heard more, the most I've heard is one produce 7 barrels a day. One well.
Right, yeah.
7 barrels a day is pretty
And
good.
that's, a barrel of oil is different from a,
Yeah, it's not a full.
it's 35 gallons
Yeah,
instead of a
35,
55 gallon
It's
drum.
not
I didn't
55.
realize that.
Yeah, it's a little different, so that's,
20 gallon short.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's by the price. But at that price, that's pretty good. Let's see, a couple other things I'm gonna talk about come out of that. Of course, you know, when the coal boom and the oil boom both in the mountains in eastern Kentucky, people didn't leave eastern Kentucky. They stayed right there and just kind of worked in those, 2 or 3. One grandpa worked on the railroad, and the other grandpa worked in the oil fields. So that's just what you did all the way through the 20s, all the way through the 70s. That was pretty much the jobs. You know, so they do that. So a couple things about that really flourished during that period. Of course, one would be moonshine, of course, because, you know, they were in a little small knit kind of community there with not a lot of people. You know, you did travel to town every day. You might have traveled to town once a month, so they just made their own moonshine. You know, when the Prohibition hit through the 20s, 1920s, they were really started into that business, making their own moonshine. And that's something that just sort of kept on. It formed out of oil and coal business because it was just a subsidiary. You know, they, on their own time, that's what they did. They couldn't run down and get it. They did that. And then another thing about that, as I always like to think about that one, is another thing that formed out of oil and coal and in the little tight-knit communities is a lot of people are kin to each other. A lot of people are kin to each other, and a lot of people are, you know, there's lots of, well, not a lot, but a lot of cases of where, you know, people would marry their third cousin, fourth cousin, second cousin, and so forth. And that's just the way it was in that time period, because I guess the best way to say it was there wasn't a whole lot. You didn't travel a long ways where you saw a lot of people. You know, your community might only be 40 people, 50 people. So that's another thing that come out of that, and that really kind of goes back to about all of us in here. In this room, all our ancestry, some of our ancestry can be traced back to one of the original settlers of Boonesboro, one of the 17.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I know, Mike, yeah, we all can. Well, you'll have at least 1 or 2 DNA markers or somebody out there because that's where it got started. You know, we were looking at that a while ago, we were talking about Hardest Creek right there. I studied that, how they come out, you know, of course, they were all in that little old fort. Boy, once they kind of made a little peace with the Indians and were allowed to spread out, they come out of that fort, how they got into urban, in my opinion, was they come out of that fort and they come right down here to Lillish Ferry, which is down on 82 there. Lillish Ferry right there, well, there's a little ferry right there, and if you look at the profiles, it's really close to Boonesboro, it's not very far. They come across Lillish Ferry right there, and when you come out of Lillish Ferry, when you're looking straight ahead, if you just look straight ahead, that's what a lot of people call Hardest Creek, but it's really Harwich Creek, right out there on 2001, out there on, come out of Clay City and hit 2001 there where the drag strip is, come on out.
Mm-hmm.
So that's Harvest Creek up in there, and now the other end of Harvest Creek is Marble Yard and Furnace right up here on the mountain.
Yeah.
So, you know, if you want to squat and take you 20 acres of land and somebody had all this good stuff here, you just kept going farther east, farther east, until you found these 20 lands you could take. And that's how all this, in my opinion, that's how all these oil wells and all this coal and all these different things sort of came back.
And there wasn't a road up the mountain.
No.
So
You come up right at Marble Yard.
the term Union Hall
Mm-hmm.
You come up what we call, it's Tanglewood now, it was McKinney Hall at one
It's McKinney
time.
Hall at one time, that actually goes right down to, you get down the pits
Well,
growing there.
but they call that Union Hall.
Yeah,
And there was not a Union Hall there, because there was no union.
no,
So my thoughts are, when you come up out of McKinney Hollow,
mm-hmm,
you could turn, make a right, and then a left, and you went down to Fitchburg.
mm-hmm,
Well, if you come out of McKinney Hollow and make a left, you can go on out, you can go to Marble Yard.
mm-hmm,
Lone Oak was not there.
no,
That road we call Lone Oak. You could go on out, you could go down Hardwich Creek. You could go on out, and there's 213, so I think that's where there was the union. But if you look right there at Marble Yard where you turn down,
mm-hmm,
you can go down Marble Yard, to the left-hand side of the road goes to the Kentucky River.
right,
The right-hand side of the road goes to the Red River.
mm-hmm,
But right there at the point, if you drop over the hill, you're going to Miller's Creek. You drop over the other side, you go to Cow Creek.
oh, yes.
And there was roads, there was at least mule paths
Right,
that went everywhere.
if you come out of Tanglewood Drive, and you just turn right, go a few feet and turn left again, that's what they call Needmore Hollow.
Needmore Hollow.
Yeah, so right down, when you start down Needmore there was a gigantic pump station there. And it wasn't really a pump station, what it was a big gigantic setup where they created their vacuum.
Vacuum line.
Yeah, had the big wheel in there, and it'd run over there, and it created that vacuum line. So what it would do is suck all this oil out of all these different hollers to that central location. Sort of like what they were doing at Texola, the same thing, but this one was still operating, it's still sitting there. You can go down to it, and when you get right to that pump house, they got the road gate. But back in the old days, you could go on down through, come out down at, up there past the furnace.
There's still vacuum running down at McKinney Hollow. You can hear it
Yeah,
now.
you hear it, yeah, well, that number's running, I know that one runs, because, yeah.
It's still running too,
It's
isn't
still
it?
running too, yeah, that's a big one. That's a big one, there's some oil in that house. You know how they got the name Needmore?
They needed more housing,
They need
needed
more,
more food,
need more sugar.
needed more sugar.
Yeah, so they always go up there and send their families in that holler up there, and there's a couple of families up there, they come in and borrow a little sugar, and so they put some in there, and they say, we need a little more, need a little more. So they finally named it Needmore Holler.
Needmore.
Yeah, that's where it's
That's where the
at.
minorities live.
That's
a lot
exactly
of the
right,
minorities.
yeah, all the time, yeah. At that end and the other end. Those two ends of Fitchburg way.
And the road that comes up through Dog Ticks,
Yeah. That's a little different road, yeah.
but they call that Four Mule Hill.
I never heard about that.
I found one, in one little, because two mules with a loaded wagon could not pull that hill, and somebody stayed there with an extra team of mules,
Yeah.
and for a small fee, they hooked you and pull you on up the hill.
Yeah, I can believe that, 'cause it's straight up.
It's Four Mule Hill.
Oh, yeah. So if you go on down Tanglewood, we're just talking about some McKinney Springs there. If you go down that road right there, now it's gated now because they're pumping oil in there. There was a company there called Buffalo Oil Company, but they're gone now. I guess the other company's doing them all now. But you're going out to that point, and you duck over that hill right there, it comes out right at Pitts, down where the graveyard is. It comes out right, there's a doctor lives right there on the side of the hill, it comes out right in his yard. But it's gated, but now the other day, I noticed it's not gated anymore.
Yeah, but now there was a big, vacuum and oil pumping station there at Pitts.
Mm-hmm.
Peggy Bryant's got some beautiful pictures of it.
Yeah, I see that. Yeah, those big pump houses, they run on a three-phase mower. So back when I was a kid, I remember that those three-phase mowers, they had a big belt on them, and all they did was turn that, it turned that, made that pump go up and down. So what these guys would do back, then, they would take a pocket knife and go over there and just put it down on those belts, cut that belt off, steal that three-phase mower, and take it down to Ravenna and sell it. Then all the oil well operators have to go back and buy their three-phase motor back, then you better put it back on.
It was a racket.
Did that for years. And that's what they do, is just kind of cut them out there. But, let's see, I got one more thing here, I think. Yes, but, I got one other thing here I was going to tell you about. Anyway, it's kind of and Kentucky is just loaded with natural resources. And of course, some of you may know or may not know that I've got a business down on 52 right as about as you go in Richmond there. It is unbelievable the amount of people that are moving to Kentucky from California, Colorado, Minnesota, and those areas. But a good number of them, probably 95% of them are all minorities that came from the Middle East, and they all say the same thing, because I'm in their stores all up down the street, and I see them, they come to the store, and I talk to them, and I say, why do y'all find Kentucky? And they say, because they never see green. Because they've always lived in the desert, and everything's brown and nothing, and they said they just can't believe that the green is here, and the green, the green in the water, and all the greenery, and they got yards, and it's just completely different than what they used to growing up. And then the other side of that is, of course, that we really just, they've really benefited from $4 gas.
That, and they say that this land is cheap.
Yeah, it is cheap.
Because to them it
Yeah, to
is,
them
but
it is cheap.
to us growing what we pay, I mean,
yeah, it's just
$50 an acre for mountain land is nothing. And, well, my neighbor that we've had a guy come in behind me up there and pay $10,000 an acre.
That's right.
For 40 acres.
I just saw a farm sale in Waco the other day for $12,000 an acre. I mean, that's $12,000.
But if
it's unbelievable.
That's what I tell my son, you better get you a good job and start saving money.
Well, here's the benefit for Esther County. The benefit for Esther County is that the next hottest resource in the next 50 years is going to be water. There's just not enough. I remember when I was a kid that the railroaders used to give us water all the time, them little bitty old waters, and in about 83 or something, they come here and said, we can't give you the water no more, the railroads cut it out. Well, just about that time, back then everybody had pop machines out front, LA machines and all that stuff, and one of these guys come through and he said, I'm getting off the Pepsi truck. I said, getting off the Pepsi truck, what are you doing? He said, I'm going to sell water. I said, selling water? You've lost your mind, selling water. This is 1984 or 5 or something like that. Now, who's the dummy? Water brings more than pop now. So, you talk about 40 years later, water, so there's just not enough.
Especially that smart water.
That's, you get that smart water down there,
$4 for a bottle of water.
Yes, sir. It's even higher. But that's right. But I tell you, good one on that, I was out in Las Vegas a few years ago, and I went out to Hoover Dam. And I thought, I'll go there and see Hoover Dam. Well, you go out there to that dam, and it's this big gigantic thing, and you stand up on that wall, and you look down, the water's so far down there that you can't hardly see it. I mean, it's way down there. And I'm sitting there looking around out of the blue, I say, these people are in trouble. And somebody said, what are you talking about? I said, that's all the water they got for everything down here. This big city down here that's running these millions of people down here. They had these big separators here, and this one had a big tag on it that says, this pump station is taking it to Arizona. And so this other one said a big tag on it. It said this station is taking it out to Nevada. And the big third one in the back, gigantic big one, it said this one's taking it back to Colorado. And I'm thinking, why in the world are they taking water back to Colorado? But evidently, since I was there, it's down another 20 or 30 feet. I mean, they're finding barrels and old cars.
Dead people.
Yeah, dead people. And they don't have enough water. That's part of the reason. It's like me. That's part of the reason why they're moving. They're coming out there, coming this way, because we got water. You got the Red River. You got all these little rivers. You got Kentucky River.
Springs.
You got springs everywhere, and it just comes out that Appalachian Mountain, and you just don't see it everywhere. Other places you just don't have that. And that's the next hottest resource, in my opinion.
Have you seen the big house up overlooking Miller's Creek?
I saw it the other day. First time I'd seen it. Yeah. I didn't know that one. I don't even know who put that one in, but it's
I can't think. He's doing the holler down here.
Oh, that's who it is. That's a neat looking place up there. I don't even know how you get to it.
If that straight line wind comes through here again like it did in 2017, I don't think that building's gonna set up there. I don't know.
He better use 2x6s.
He better.
And screws.
I saw it the other day and I wondered, I thought.
It's a neat place. So you get up on 2 for each side, or you get up on.
Go out on the dump road.
And go out that
And
way.
you get out there and it forks.
Yeah.
Goes to the right, goes to Robbie Mack's old cabin
Yeah.
sitting up there, and goes to the left.
And
And that's where that comes out at.
Yeah.
Golden Rogers cut the road in there.
He cut it for him. And that's where he's living.
I think it's a NFL player or a
Yeah.
retired
He's a
NFL
retired-
player
he
play for
didn't-
the Pittsburgh Steelers that bought that land in there.
Really?
Yeah, my neighbor across the road from me been working with Goble Rogers, Goble's nephew, so it is.
Go away.
And it's Goble's nephew, Daryl.
Daryl.
Yeah, Daryl told me it's he used to play for the Pittsburgh Steelers in the NFL.
Yeah.
I think that's the team that he retired now, and he bought all that in there.
Wow.
Yeah.
He found her.
On the
He
internet.
found Irvin somehow, so.
Well, one thing for sure, he's not gonna be pumping oil or mine coal.
No.
Neither one of those he'll be doing. That's it.
And then after he bought it, he found out his right of way was out there on that point. And he wound up, left out, and was able,
Top man.
because I went out there hunting Goble, I owed him some money, and somebody come out there and said, Goble, you sure that you need to be cutting this road through here? And he said, why? And he said, well, it's my property here. And
That's
they worked something out. I mean,
Past out Terry's old place?
yeah,
Way on back.
way on back.
Okay, I know where you at, yeah. I know where you at.
You see Richmond.
Oh, I
Up
know,
there.
it's cool. It looks good. I sure didn't know that's how you got to it. But that's all I have.
I know Darryl killed a bunch of rattlesnakes out
Oh,
there
yes,
last year.
yes.
Yeah.
Yes, sir. That's
We did
slave
too.
country right there.
Yeah, we killed one, had a squirrel in
Mm-hmm.
Darryl killed one last year. It had 9 babies inside of it.
Oh, I bet.
Yeah.
When I was a kid, that used to be the old dump, see? The dump, you know, one time we were gonna go rattlesnake hunting, my dad said. So he fixed up this plumbing pipe and had a electric wire down in it, and went from back here to that black chair and had a big loop on the end of it. So we go up there to the dump, you know, the old dump. And we're not there 2 minutes, and there's a black snake, I'm telling you, he stretched from one side of the road, and his head was on the other side of the road, that's how long he was. And he jumps out and gets this thing, you know, and he's over there trying to catch him, and I'm about 2 miles up the street watching, smiling, you know. But that's the only snake we saw that day. And I didn't go back rattlesnake hunting either.
That's why snakes are so bad up there, because of the old dump up there.
$4 a foot.
Well, they like it, they like it rock.
Yeah.
They like it rock, it heats them up and they move. And those snakes like it, they'll move at night, because they lay on the rock all day.
Yeah.
When it gets cold, they can't move.
Right.
So they got limestone. They'll stay down under that ground, you know, where they broke all that rock for years. That's it, anybody got any questions?
How many more wells in production have got approximately in Esther County?
In Esther County? I've got the number, I think I got it right here, I looked at it. There's a place online, let me tell you this, you know. There's a place online here, it's called, I found it the other day when I was looking. It's called, it'll give you all that info. It's called Shale, SHALE-XP.com. And it'll give you all that information, and it says that Esther County, it doesn't say how many, it just says, see, and what it is, it'll be dated. This is 2001 data, but it says we got 1.5, 1,500. Oh, wait a minute, that's got a K on it, that's 3 zeros, 15,000 drilled wells. It's got 126 active wells, is what it says. Only 2 operators in the county, only 4 permits on file, and Esther County accounts for 33.74% of oil production in Kentucky.
That's unbelievable, isn't it?
Well, that's that 1 year. Now, I couldn't find numbers for 2022, so, you know, you only got that one number. But that was a big year. Oil must have been up that year.
Hey, there's oil wells in Ravenna. There's one right behind Ravenna Market.
Yeah.
I mean,
yeah.
and over on the railroad,
Yeah.
over that
Mm-hmm.
shale bank up with the golf course,
Yeah.
there's several oil wells up there on it.
My theory was, and I always heard that oil follows water. So if you got a water well out there somewhere, it's got that sulfur in it, which I got one right behind my cabin on Sandy Hill. It's got that sulfur, you know, the old timers used to get down in that because they said it was good for them, you know. And I bet there's oil in there somewhere too, but you probably have to go. Don't tell me how deep to find it. But there's one little water springs in there everywhere. But they all got that smell, that sulfur-like smell to it.
At one time, they would pump water back down in the float, trying to float the oil
Oh,
on the
now,
top.
well, that's what the fracking was. The fracking was a little different, but they were putting pressure on it, right?
I know.
So the fracking was they take these wells and then do they blow water or they blow
Well, they
air pressure?
They had air, but they had a concoction
Oh yeah.
that, remember, because we talked about
Yeah.
that, and people want to know what was in it, and they said, well, we can't tell you because
Yeah.
we give our secrets away.
Yeah.
But they didn't want you to know what was in it.
No, when the fracking, what it does is it cracks the rock.
Exactly.
Yeah, it cracks the rock and it kind of.
And they say it can cause some places have had earthquakes out west, they claim, because
Oh,
of
sure.
it.
Well, if you take your plumbing in your house and you go to one and you put an air hose on it and you got the rest of them it'll eventually blow the pipes out.
Well,
So that's exactly what you're doing on fracking, you're doing the same thing, they just want to blow oil out the other end, or gas, or whatever.
but like the water company on the other, at the water district, you know, they got on us, called us the leaky 11. We were one of the leaky 11 because our water loss was right at 40%. Well, we're having that problem now. It's down now to right at 20% where we've got equipment. And when you shut a leak, when you stop a leak, like you're talking about, then that puts pressure somewhere else.
Oh, yeah.
So now they're down to the point when they shut it, they'll find a big leak and cut it off, and it's just a matter of time to another leak. It finds you weak spot.
It's just like Bugs Bunny, that old cartoon, you know, you plug in one hole, another, jump
Another
out over
one.
here and over here.
So where do that
That's like
come
me in the show
from?
business, right there. Plug one
You
hole,
know.
5 more jump out.
And people don't know it, I don't guess they would care. But part of the city of Irvin still has wooden water line,
I would bet, yeah.
the
Oh,
mains
you
that
know,
were put in originally. And they're still good, I mean, they're not leaking.
that is unbelievable.
Because well, nobody hardly remembers Fighting Branch, but
Yeah.
it ain't what it's Cardinal Valley or something now, I don't know.
It's,
But, you know,
yeah,
it's
it's
Fighting
got-
Branch with my mom and I,
Oh,
we
when I
all lived up
went to
there.
wherever he was.
But when they went up there and
Cardinal
replaced the
Board.
water lines, I watched them dig up wooden water lines.
Wooden water
up there.
lines.
And they had wire,
Yeah.
they were about 6 inches, and they had either burnt, there was charcoal on the inside, had wire wrapped around it,
Yeah.
like a number 9 wire.
Well, they're putting it all new from College Hill, from Waco Bank out that way, and I'm telling you, they're putting some big old pipes in there.
Well, they're speculating on,
Yeah.
there's gonna be subdivisions going
There
down.
already is, all the way about as far as you can see, but yeah, they're putting big water lines. And I mean,
But
I can't get over
I'm
that.
probably the oldest one in here, but I mean, I remember when Richmond Road was, you all do too.
I
but it
don't
was,
remember that, see,
the old
Martin,
curvy.
Diane Miller and I would sit on her, back of her
Yeah.
dad's walk when they was building Richmond Road in Winston High School. We graduated in 1970, so.
I graduated in 72, so, but I remember.
All right, so I got a question here. Right there by Cash and Carriage, put a saying that little bridge is there. You can see it right now. They dug it out, that little bridge. Is that the old Richmond Road or is it part of the Ronnie B?
No, that's part of the Ronnie B.
That's what I thought.
Yes.
Yeah, but that's the railroad.
That's
You
the
see it when
railroad
you go
bridge.
through there, they got a sign there that says some kind of new equipment's coming.
Right.
Behind it.
Yeah, no, that's the old
Ronnie B.
railroad bed.
Yeah. And the old Ronnie B, I tell you where else I deliver motors in there all the time. Turn right there at GoDaddy's, that new store on
Yes,
Richmond Road. Turn there at GoDaddy's and go out there just through the four-way stop sign, go right there and turn right, and there's a road down there called Ronnie Drive.
Yes,
That's
Ronnie
it.
Drive.
You can see it plain as day, it just lines up as straight as an arrow right there.
I'll tell you something
What
else.
Ronnie B
Did it
does.
go through Brasfield? Did it go through
Yes,
Brasfield?
it went through Brasfield.
Oh, it went that way too?
Yes,
That's
oh
it.
yeah, you
Yeah.
can see it
I
out through
didn't know
there.
that.
I'll tell you, you go out to the end of, Wiseman Town Road
Yeah.
at Panola, when you
Yeah.
get to the bridge down there, crosses Grand
Oh,
Creek, walk that creek down about 200 yards, there's a trestle,
Still there.
still there across
Yeah.
a big trestle. I mean, I'm talking probably,
So it went
all
from
this
there to
urban,
there.
yes,
Yeah. I didn't
yes,
know
it come down through there and it went down by the soccer field
that. Okay. Yeah.
and come out right there at the soccer field and then went down the road bed and you can still see part of the old road bed over the graveyard. It went
Right.
right in behind West Urban School.
Yeah, that's it. Well,
Yeah.
that bridge that was right there, that's for the Ronnie B
That
way.
was the Ronnie B.
Yeah,
yes.
that's the one that used to have the hangings on the other side.
And that was a narrow gauge.
Yeah, it was little. I mean, all right, I know what you're talking about.
But you're talking about the L and N. See, the L and N had the contract for all the coal
What do you mean all the coal?
that come out of here forever.
Yeah, for
Well,
a long time.
it
And
had
they
to
sold
come-
so many times that you, seaboard systems, remember, and it
Well,
was something else. And
What
then
does
it went back.
CSX stand for?
CSX, I don't know, but it's.
Consolidated System.
Yeah, so it's probably all
Well,
together.
but what happened? At Jackson, there's a job called the Hill Helpers.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, they show.
Well, Clyde worked it, I worked
Yeah.
it a couple of times,
Big
but what they
network.
always say, it's a railroader's best friend.
Mhm.
Well, when they consolidated, it wasn't. Now they take all the coal down the coast, so they don't have to come this way and push it over that hill.
Right, now.
Because you had to have, what they put, 5 engines on the back, Clyde, usually.
Sometimes you would, and sometimes would be that many.
It depends on how much.
Just shoved up the hill.
But now you think about it, you're going up that
Oh, I
hill,
know it. Loaded.
well, and you're loaded, they're pushing you.
Yeah.
But what happens when you get and you're going down a big hill,
Yeah.
if your train's got 100 cars,
Yeah.
what happens when you get 51 cars over? You better have a good engineer up there. Because
Yeah.
that weight's kicking in now, they're not pushing, your gravity's, and there's a big curve right at the foot of that hill, ain't there, Clyde?
Yeah.
I mean, in the old days, before the dynamic brake,
I hope this deal in Ravinia is going where they take us up through there, but they'll never take us that far. They'll take us up
maybe,
2 or 3 miles, Typo, up that way, that's not very far up there, is it? What they call Typo?
but that'd be, if we could have a dinner train between here and Jackson, you talk about a beautiful ride.
Yeah, it'd never go that far, that's a long way.
Have you ever been up through there on the rails?
No, never, but,
I got to do that a little while before they fired me.
well,
Never did tell me why, but I first took my switch key one day. Turned out to be the best thing I ever had to do. It was, I went back to school, and things had worked out for me, but
That, their job was like, you know, it's out and in, weather, he was a switchman, he's
yeah.
out in the weather all the time.
Mhm.
You know, whether he went to conductor some and stuff, but.
Oh, I remember when they replaced that with the light.
Yeah.
That was in the mid-80s. That cut, what, 2 people out? Did that cut that many people out when they put the light on the back of the caboose, took the caboose off?
I don't have any really took.
whether it took the conductor and the flagman,
I thought it took 2
It
of
took
them.
half the crew.
took half the crew.
I thought. Yeah, the little flashing light.
Cause I had one of them smart off me one day, allowed you, about teaching school, I said, well, they can't place me with the red blinking light.
That's true. I don't even remember being red, I thought it was like white. It was blinking.
It was a,
Yeah, I couldn't replace you with that.
but in the old days, like you went across what they call a hot box detector,
Mhm.
which when you went over it, if it detected a high temperature or there was something dragging on the train, a light would just start flashing.
Yeah.
Well, the guy, the person on the caboose had to look for the hot box detector. If that light was blinking, you radioed the engineer, you had to take a sidetrack. Someone got off from the front and started walking back. Someone got off the back, started walking to the front, trying to find out what was, because you could smell
Yeah.
or feel that hot journal on that car.
Yeah, oh yeah.
Well, when they replaced that box was a computer.
Yeah.
And when you went by those detectors, a voice would come on and say you're doing 42 miles an hour. You have 102 cars in your train. The 15th car back from the engine has a hot journal. So that box was
Yeah.
more than just a blinking.
Oh, yeah.
It was a,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah, that was something else.
and they weighed the cars at price. There was a scale that shot you remember they had colored markers on the
I
side of
remember
the
that,
cars?
Yeah.
Well, that scale shot a beam, and it would read how high or low that car was setting. It could tell you. That's how they weighed that car, and it came out in Louisville.
Unbelievable.
I mean, and that was in the 70s, so nowadays it's wild the way that,
It was just about like co-business. They started out with this many workers and they just kept cutting them down. And in the end, they're down here to this many workers.
profit margin.
You know, the profit margin was way bigger. You replace them with machines and it's the same
Yep.
exact thing. Same exact thing. Any questions?